Greetings, everybody. Welcome to episode 4 of the Champion Mindset Podcast. I'm your host, Don John, and I'm here with a very special guest, somebody who's inspired me since before I was even born, and somebody who honestly lives the boss life every single day without even trying. And that is my Uncle Joe, Joe Boss.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Of course.
Nice to be here.
So, the first question that I have for you is, obviously you're on the Champion Mindset Podcast, and we're focusing on people who champion a certain cause, champion ideas, champion generations. So when you look at the life of Joe Boss, what is something that you would like to champion?
Well, if I reflect back and you catch me a little off guard in the question, but I think when I think back, I think about the fact that I had a very limited education, and one thing that I wanted to do was to prove to myself and to others that I could do any kind of job that anybody else could do. Even though I had the limited education, I could do it the same as somebody who had a higher education. And I was fortunate because of what I did in my career that I could do that. And I proved to myself and I proved to others, that, sometimes you don't need, the 4-year degree or the PhD or something like that. But if you just use good common sense and you think about things through and through, then, you can be just as effective in life and empowering people and making people respect you just as much, without having all of that kind of education or anything like that.
Awesome. So you touched briefly on the career you had, and obviously you had a long-lasting and very illustrious, and honestly, you had one of the coolest careers that I could ever talk about. And it's such a cool career that you probably to this day can't even speak about all of his dealing. But to what you can disclose, describe what your career was and what it entailed.
Well, generally my career was to, gather evidence on money laundering and drug trafficking, and doing it in a manner that, I would get evidence compiled together against those people who were dealing in those kinds of situations and using that to convict those people. But what I was fortunate about was it wasn't just about convicting people, but it was also about bringing forth, convictions against institutions who were helping those people to, conduct money laundering or drug trafficking. So, I was very fortunate to have been able to do that. And like you said, there's some things that I just can't talk about. There are some things I can talk about. But, it was very, and as I said before, I didn't have any formal education or any formal training in that area. A lot of it was I developed it on my own. So, I developed the procedures, the programs, and then eventually what happened was some of those programs and some of those procedures were recognized to be from a national level. And I was able to actually do training of people so that they could understand how to do that type of work in order to, catch people who were involved in that type of activity.
Mm-hmm. So, I don't have the hands-on experience that you have, but I have watched Scarface, and I have watched The Godfather and movies like that, and American Gangster and things of that nature. And what I picked up from these movies is that money laundering and drug trafficking kind of come hand in hand. So, like, in your personal experience, like, were they kind of like mutually exclusive, these cases, or was it all kind of tied in together?
No, it's always tied together.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I'll just tell you, people watch those movies and, it has a lot of violence, and there is violence involved in some of the activities that are conducted. But my work was more of the analysis type of work. So I would analyze, financial records and stuff like that, so I could get the evidence on paper, and then that evidence would be used in court. So a lot of my work was done, with maybe like a sealed affidavit, so that this way nobody knew who it was that was compiling that information. But the court would recognize that that information was to be used for convictions. So it sounds glorious and it sounds exciting, but sometimes it actually was boring because it was very detailed work. And so I laugh when people say, okay, so you had a hand in helping to convict people on drug related type criminal activity. They think right away of guns, and they think of shootings and stuff like that. But my work was never like that, really. My work was more boring. It was actually analytical.
Yeah, yeah. What I've noticed with that type of stuff, again from the movies, is the violence and the trafficking of the drugs itself. It's harder to get them on those type of things because they're constantly moving. They have stand-ins for them that'll take the fall for them. But one thing that they can't kind of shake is the paper trail. So getting them on stuff like money laundering and tax evasion is a more effective way of convicting these type of criminals.
Right.
From what I've seen.
Absolutely. That's more. You're absolutely right. So, I'll tell you one funny story related to the work. One time I was looking at a particular person, and I was analyzing their financials, and I was doing it along with another law enforcement bureau, DEA, and DEA had this guy spotted for a very long time, and he would have people come into the bank and deposit money, that was related to drug sales, and he had people bring in duffel bags filled with money, and the person would go to a particular teller in the bank, and they'd put the duffel bag into the teller window, and the teller would count it, and it would be like maybe $1 million deposit in cash. But what happened was we were watching that, and we were watching the financial records, and we were gathering the evidence. And finally, at one point, when DEA said, "Well, there's enough evidence here; we can, go after him now." So they notified him and said, "Your account is frozen at the bank, and we're going to continue to accept deposits, for the next 7. I thought it was 7 or 10 days, something like that." And why that was a situation for the drug dealer was because he had so many people that were going to be bringing in deposits that he couldn't stop them in time. Okay, so for the next 7 days, they accumulated, I think it was over $7 million that he couldn't stop. But here's the thing: he was doing that drug deals on consignment. So in other words, he was taking it from the cartels, the drugs, and he was selling it up here on consignment. So he owed the drug cartels the $7 million.
$7 million. So he's not even pocketing the $7 million.
Right. So, but the funny part was that, he realized he was in a pickle because he was now caught between DEA and the cartel. So the DEA was watching him very closely, and he had gotten onto a jet, and he was going to fly to a country where he couldn't be extradited. Okay, so they got a hold of the flight information, and they flew ahead of the plane to the country. Let's just say it was England, for example. Okay, so they arrived in England before the plane arrived in England. But the funny part was they stopped the plane on the runway. And then they went on the plane and arrested him on the runway. And the reason for that, and I didn't know this, was that if the plane ever reached the gate, then it wouldn't be in the U.S. territory anymore. But it's considered to be in the U.S. territory until the plane gets to the gate. Then it's in that country.
Yeah.
So they grabbed him up on the airplane.
Hey, that's insane. That's an insane story, Uncle Joe. You know, one thing that I've been trying to exercise more of in my life is definitely patience. And in your career, you know, in order to hit these criminals with, especially the RICO statute, uh, it takes years upon sometimes decades of compiling evidence. Uh, so, what would you say your strategy was to remain focused and patient when it came to compiling the evidence in order to go after these criminals?
Well, it was just a mindset that I didn't want to give up no matter what. I didn't
Mm,
want to give up at all. I mean, I was very proud of the work that I did. I was also very determined that I would see it through to the end. And you're right. Sometimes particular investigation I was on, one time I was away for like almost 2 years.
jeez.
I come home periodically,
Mm,
but basically it was away for like 2 years on the investigation.
mm,
And when you put that much time into something, there's nothing that's going to stand in your way. I mean, as far as I'm concerned. And I was fortunate because I had a very good team of people with me that felt the same way. They wanted to see justice prevail. They wanted to see, these drug dealers and whatnot, take them off the street, so that, we were determined to do this type of work. So it's just a mindset. It's a mindset that, you want to see it to the end. You take pride in what you do, and you feel like you're making a difference at the end.
and that's exactly what I wanted to make an emphasis on in this platform. That's the champion mindset. Everything that you just described,
Yeah.
and it doesn't have to be
It doesn't have to be
sport.
looking at Monday laundering.
Yeah, it doesn't have to be looking at money laundering. You don't have to step in the ring and get your brains punched in for it. You know, it could be whatever your endeavor is or whatever you decide to do in life, and more importantly, whatever you decide to be in life.
Right.
If you transfer that mentality into what you do, all you could have is success, like my Uncle Joe.
And don't ever, to the audience, don't ever think that you can't do something because somebody else has got a higher education, or they have more experience. If you believe in yourself and you believe in what you want to do, then as they say, and it's not just the saying, you can do it. It might take time, but you can do it.
Absolutely, absolutely. So that actually leads me to a follow-up question. How did you personally overcome the quote-unquote educational limitations or people with more experience in your career?
Um, when I reflect back on how that happened, um, I think it was because I loved the subject matter so much that I got so deep into what the laws were and stuff like that. And I'm not even a lawyer, but I really loved all the laws and everything that pertained to that type of work.
Mm.
So, I mean, I was able to interpret the law similar to how the courts might interpret it. Whereas the people that I was working with, they might have known the generality of the law. They might have known some specifics, but they didn't know the law as well and how to apply it to the situations that we were looking at.
Mm.
So I think that's what drove me the most, because eventually, I guess because I loved it so much that I was actually doing training of those laws and those regulations, and how they're used in particular settings and whatnot, and it was such a great feeling to teach people and people who really wanted to follow and do the same thing I was doing, because it was really a blessing to turn around and see somebody who wanted to learn the laws like I wanted to learn the law, and then go out and apply it. And and then they were always either, some were working with me, some were not. And when later on, when they were having their own achievements, you would talk with them, and it was just great to hear them say, hey, I was able to do this, that, and the other thing because I remember what you told me and how you taught me how to look at this. That's a tremendous great feeling. And it's just, we're just using the example of what I did for a living. But again, this could be for anything.
You know, going right back to the theme of the podcast, championing a generation, right there. That's exactly what I was talking about when it came to championing a generation, having that passion of not only what you do, but passing that knowledge on to somebody else who has that same passion and interest for what you do as you did. So that's just that's an amazing
And
thing.
it follows, I'll tell you what, Jonathan, the other part that really is rewarding is, like I'm retired now. And, it's a lot of people who I worked with or who I trained, they stay in touch with me and they're still working. And they're telling me things like, well, the greatest time I ever had was when I worked with you with this. So you're hearing these rewards through the words of people, and these rewards are coming to you later on in life. And there's no greater feeling that, people still remember you and, want to remember you. Not that they remember you, but they want to remember you. And that they're still throwing ideas at you and saying, hey, Joe, hey, listen, hey, what do you think about this? What do you think about that? So that's another great reward and great feeling to have.
Amen.
Yeah.
Into that, Uncle Joe. So another theme that I've been talking about on my platform is, the theme of long-lasting relationships. And you've been married to Auntie Natalie for, oh my goodness, like
35 years.
35 years, right? And
but we knew each other for 5 years before that. So
geez, so you've known her for
I got about 40 years into her.
You see? And listen, you two represent a love that.
Well, I should qualify this because if my wife watches this, it's 35 years next year. But that's okay.
And you two represent a love that is a very rare form these days because people are so caught up in their idea of what love should be and their labels, their social groups and whatnot. And just to, address the elephant in the room, Auntie Natalie, she looks a lot more like me than him. So I'll just throw that out there. And what do you think it is that helped you to overcome those biases within your relationship and thrive?
I think it's because I love the person. To me, love is defined by the person, not by what they are necessarily. There's qualities in people that that you come to appreciate, and cherish, that you wouldn't get with somebody else. So it's really nothing about color or anything like that. It's all about what that person has that you enjoy the most. Like my wife, I can't say enough. I mean, you could turn around and say, well, it's a great marriage because she cooks and this and that. That has nothing to do with it. She has a great heart. She's fun to be with. I mean, she's going to watch this and say, yeah, sure. But she is. I mean, she really is. And, she's truthful and she's very faithful. And, these are the things that, I was looking for in a person. And I was fortunate enough to find it in her. And it's those types of reasons of why I love her, and that's how I define love with her. And I just don't know what I would do without her. I mean, crazy, huh?
Yeah, definitely pretty crazy. It's pretty crazy.
So so going back to your question, love is defined many different ways. You're right, but for me, it's defined by not some of the things that people put a high price tag on. Hopefully, anybody who's fallen in love will fall in love for all the right reasons. For those reasons, the right reasons were as I explained.
Absolutely. And to kind of piggyback off of what you're saying, these are qualities that, it's hard to look for those qualities if you don't exhibit those qualities yourself, you know? So when you talk about faithfulness, when you talk about, just being a fun person to be around, when it comes to just loving somebody, having the capacity to love somebody, most people, especially my age, we don't have the capacity to, open up our hearts and minds to another individual, because we're so wrapped up in what's going on with us. So, to hear you speak like that is, it's refreshing. It's refreshing in that sense. And to see your relationship, it's kind of, I don't want to say like a baseline because obviously I live my own life, but it's definitely something that I can look at and be like, yeah, that's really cool. And that's something that I can look for. And it has no bounds. That's another thing that I've seen from your marriage. Like, love, it's not defined by what somebody else would like to view your relationship
Oh no,
as.
absolutely not.
It's really between you and that person.
Yeah.
And, if you love that person, then what you do thrives, even from when they say good, bad, sickness, and health, things of that nature. It really is that, It really is that. And I've seen it with your relationship with Anthony. I've seen it.
Well, it's been around for a while.
Yeah, absolutely. So
I appreciate that question, though. Thank you.
yeah, absolutely. We're getting into the nitty gritty of the Champion Mindset podcast. And, to piggyback off of that, obviously with you being married to a black woman for 35 years, you raised two black sons,
Oh, yeah.
And listen, I can't even lie to you. Out of all of my family members, this is the most hard-ass dad out of all of them. I promise you. I promise you. You were the toughest on your sons, and they turned out to be two upstanding citizens. So, what do you think your approach was to fatherhood, and especially keeping in mind that you're not just fathering just any type of kids, you're fathering two young black men in a society that is not really accepting of interracial marriages like that.
Yeah, I'm not going to lie to you. It was difficult, especially in the area where we lived. We had a lot of instances where, unfortunately, certain people were trying to influence the boys, my sons, on how they should be. And the one thing I wanted to try to instill in them right from the very beginning, and I think it stuck with them, is that just be yourself, be an individual. Don't worry about what other people say about you. Don't pay attention to it. Even if it's something that's complimentary, just say thank you. But don't think that's the greatest thing on since canned beer. Take it. That's fine. But just be yourself, and just remember that we all are of the same. I don't care how you cut the pie. We're all the same. And but it was hard. I think that they have grown now. I mean, they're older now. One's 30, one's 26, and I think that they've grown into good men who have come to a point where, or have already been at a point, and is still in a point of where they know who they are, and they know what they want to do, and I don't know whether it was because I was a little bit strict. I don't know. There's no real set plan for bringing up children. It's sort of fly by your pants. You just try to teach them all the good things, all the things that really matter. Respect, honor, truthfulness. Those are the things that I think are the building blocks for a child to become a man. And I strongly believe that my children are honest, trustworthy, and know what's right. and they really don't look at a person for other than what's in their heart and what those people really represent. And they know enough that certain people represent certain things that they should not, and they don't bother with them. And I'm grateful for that. I really am. I'm glad that they hold themselves to a higher level when it comes to looking at a person, because they're looking at them for their honesty, for their trustworthiness, that type of thing. I mean, that's the best I can explain it to you, Jonathan.
And you did a great job of explaining it. So, all throughout my life, one thing that I've noticed about you is your basement is probably the coolest man cave that I've ever been to. And you've always, you're a hardworking man, but you always found time to go into that basement and we might not see you for a few days. So, how important do you think that work relaxation balance is when it comes to being effective in your work?
Now you're hitting on something that's a little bit. Give me a minute. You need the balance. I learned that later on in life. I wish I had learned it earlier. I guess because I wanted to prove so much in work that I put work first. And I missed a lot. I missed the boys when they first started walking. Sometimes they were in a situation and I was far away for work and I wasn't there. There was a lot of burden put on my wife. To take care of them while I wasn't there. And I wasn't there a lot. And I regret it. I really do. Sorry.
No, you're good, Uncle Joe. This is why we're here.
So it's imperative that there be quality time with the family. So for anybody, take it from an older guy. Work is important. Don't get me wrong, but family is more important. There's no two doubts about it. So anybody who's thinking about that, or that comes in and they think about that at a given time, always try to make that balance. Always try to make it.
That's absolutely.
You don't want to regret anything later on in life.
That's absolutely correct, Uncle Joe. It's crazy. I was just having a conversation with one of my friends about this a couple of days ago, and he wants to strive. He's in that striving mode, right? And he's striving because he wants to have something to leave for his family. Like I want, just in case, to be there for my family in that way, which I completely understood. But I was just like, he's like, I want to make sure my family is okay, basically,
Yeah.
right? And I was like, that's all well and good, but you want to know the best way to make sure your family is okay? And then he's like, what is that way? I'm like, make sure your family is okay. Simple as that.
Yeah.
And the best way to make sure your family is okay is to do just that. Be there for your family, be that ear to listen, be that presence in their life, and to give you a little bit of a pat on the back. As much as you could, you were there for the family, not just Bradley and Cameron, but for me as well. There was no point where I was just like, where's Uncle Joe? Like you were always a phone call.
Well,
away.
a phone call away. Yeah, I mean, I tried to.
And you were always, trust me, your presence was known.
Okay.
Your presence was felt.
Well,
so
I love you, Jonathan. You know that, and it's just part of it. When you love somebody, you're there for them as much as you possibly can.
Absolutely.
I mean, I all you can do is try to give advice. You can help them to try to follow through, but at least be there to try to give them the answers that might help them.
Absolutely.
So yeah.
Absolutely. And one thing that I will say is that you know, that's the number one thing when it comes to championing a generation. You know, without being present, there is no championing a generation, because I always say champion is a verb, it's an action word. You know, we get caught up in the adjective, I want to become this, I want to become that, you know, but we don't sit back and allow ourselves to be present and just be. And in being, we're championing, we're utilizing that action word. And, you know, that's why I thought of this platform and brought people onto the platform who I felt were exemplifying the action word, the verb champion. Not just the fancy titles, you know?
Right, I understand.
And, you know, that's why I'm so honored and so thankful to have you on this platform.
I thank you for thinking of me that way.
Oh yeah.
I appreciate it.
You already know, Uncle Joe. And with that, we're signing off.